They told you Horus was just a myth, just another god in a forgotten pantheon. But what if I told you the story of Horus isn't fiction? It's a spiritual blueprint, a symbolic code hidden in plain sight. This isn't about ancient Egypt. It's about you. From the moment you were born, you've been surrounded by fragments of a story you were never taught to read. A divine child, born of death and magic. A war between light and chaos. An eye torn open to see beyond illusion. This isn't mythology, it's your forgotten memory. The battle of Horus and Set isn't a relic of the past. It's the war still raging inside you, every day. And until you understand the myth for what it truly is, you'll keep mistaking your soul's calling for a story that doesn't belong to you. But it does. It always has. You're not here to learn history. You're here to remember. Before Horus could rise, Osiris had to fall. That's how it begins, not with triumph, but with betrayal, fragmentation, and death. Osiris, once the wise and just king, was torn apart by his own brother, Set dismembered and scattered, his body broken into pieces, and his rule cast into darkness. But this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something sacred. Because while Set celebrated the collapse of divine order, Isis, the sacred feminine, moved in silence. She didn't mourn. She remembered, piece by piece. She gathered the scattered parts of Osiris, breathing life back into the dead. Through her magic, through her knowing, she resurrected him, not as a king of the earth, but as lord of the underworld. And from that act of divine love and power, Horus was born. Horus wasn't born of life. He was born of death, transcended. He is the child of mystery and resurrection, the spark that rises after everything else has collapsed. That's what makes his birth different. Horus isn't just a figure in a story. He's a symbol of what is born within you after destruction, after loss, after the ego crumbles and the old world ends. He is the part of you that is conceived not in safety, but in sacred chaos. And that's the first truth they never told you. Horus doesn't emerge when everything is perfect. He arrives when your world has been torn apart. He's the rebirth inside the wreckage. In spiritual terms, Horus is the awakened self, the part of you that can only be born when the false self dies. Just like Osiris had to be destroyed, your illusions, attachments, and surface-level identity often need to break for the higher self to come forward. Horus is the child of that breaking. Not your ruin, but your rebirth. And Isis, the one who made his birth possible, isn't just a goddess in a book. She's the symbol of your inner wisdom, your intuition, your connection to divine feminine power. She remembers what you've forgotten, and it's through her that Horus is born within you. But there's a reason this story was wrapped in symbolism. The ancient Egyptians didn't write manuals, they wrote myths, because myths can hide truth in plain sight and protect it from those who would misuse it. Osiris represents your divine nature, Set, your chaotic impulses and ego, Isis, your inner healer, and Horus. He is the rising light, the real you, awakened. This wasn't superstition. It was a spiritual map, a technology of transformation. Some knowledge is too esoteric for YouTube. That's why we created Insights Academy, our free newsletter where we go deeper. For a limited time, you'll also receive a copy of the Kybalion, links in the description. The myth of Horus isn't linear. It spirals, like your own growth. You'll live it again and again, in different forms. Every time you lose yourself, suffer a fall, feel shattered, or wander in darkness, you're reliving Osiris. And every time something stirs in you that says, this isn't the end, I will rise, you're meeting Horus. The story isn't meant to entertain you. It's meant to activate you. You are the myth, playing itself out in real time. The ancient Egyptians didn't worship Horus as a god because they needed something to fear. They revered him because they saw what he represented, the potential to rise above death, above chaos, above the programmed mind that keeps you chained. Horus is a living force inside the human spirit, waiting to be remembered, not followed, embodied. You don't need to believe in gods or hieroglyphs to live this truth. You only need to look at your own life. Where have you died? Where have you been dismembered, cast into confusion or grief or failure? That's where Isis begins her work. And if you listen closely, you'll hear the stirring of something within you that refuses to stay broken. That's Horus. The war between Horus and Set didn't happen in the sky. It happens inside you, every single day. You've been taught to see mythology as something distant, disconnected from your life. But these stories weren't written for entertainment. They were written to reflect the inner landscape of your soul. And the story of Horus isn't about a battle fought long ago between two gods. It's about the ongoing war between your higher self and the forces that want to keep you asleep. Set represents more than chaos. He is your lower nature, the voice of fear, greed, jealousy, domination, and impulse. He is the ego unchecked. He doesn't come wearing horns. He whispers through your need to control, to lash out, to take what's not yours, to put yourself above others at any cost. Set is the drive to survive at the expense of everything sacred. And Horus, born of resurrection, is the part of you that knows there's another way. He's not just fighting Set, he's fighting the part of himself that's vulnerable to becoming Set. That's why their battle is so complex. It's not just light versus dark. It's a test of identity. Set didn't just kill Osiris out of hatred. He wanted the throne. He wanted control over divine order. And isn't that the same thing the ego does? It wants to rule your mind, your emotions, your life. It hijacks your purpose and turns it into ambition. It poisons your clarity with desire. It doesn't want you awake. It wants you reactive, wounded, and consumed by distraction. That's what Set does best. He fragments. He divides. He thrives on imbalance. The ancient myth describes Horus and Set battling for years, with no clear victor. It wasn't a quick war, and neither is yours. You might feel like you've made progress, only to be pulled back into old habits, old fears, old patterns. That's part of it. Spiritual awakening isn't a switch you flip. It's a fight, a daily one. The ego doesn't give up its throne willingly. It has to be outgrown, challenged, and eventually transmuted. And here's the part most people miss. Horus doesn't win by destroying Set completely. In the ancient version, Horus defeats Set. Yes, but Set is not killed. He is integrated. In some retellings, Set is placed on Ra's solar bark and made to guard it through the underworld. What does that mean? It means the very force that once ruled through chaos is now placed in service to divine order. Not suppressed, not annihilated, redirected. That's spiritual maturity. It's not about pretending the shadow doesn't exist. It's about using it consciously. Your rage can become courage. Your desire can become devotion. Your ambition can become service. The parts of you that once served your ego can serve your soul, if you have the discipline to face them without flinching. The battle of Horus and Set is the longest war you'll ever fight, because it's not fought outside. It's fought in your reactions, your choices, your silence, your temptations. It's in how you speak to people when you're tired. It's in whether you show up when no one's watching. It's in the small moments where Set tries to reclaim the throne and Horus quietly resists. You don't need a sword, you need awareness. And just like in the myth, there will be moments when it looks like Set is winning. You'll fall, doubt yourself, act from your wounds. But every time you realign, every time you choose presence over impulse, truth over ego, stillness over chaos, you reaffirm the throne of Horus within you. This war doesn't end with a single victory. It ends when the chaos inside you no longer runs the show, when your shadow becomes your teacher, not your master. That's when the inner kingdom is restored. And Horus, the divine child of resurrection, finally takes his rightful place. When Horus fought Set, he lost his eye, not just in battle, but in meaning. Because the Eye of Horus isn't just an ancient symbol, it's a forgotten key, a message carved into stone, passed through temples, whispered through time. They called it the Wadjet, the eye that sees beyond the physical, the eye that doesn't just look, but perceives. And when you understand it, really understand it, you begin to realize that what you thought was just myth is actually one of the most advanced spiritual metaphors ever recorded. In the myth, Set gouges out Horus's left eye, the lunar eye, the intuitive one. But Thoth, the god of wisdom and sacred measurement, restores it, not by returning it to its original state, but by making it whole again. It's repaired, transformed, enlightened. The message, vision lost in the chaos of life, can be restored, but not the same. Better, stronger, more awake. The Eye of Horus isn't just a religious image. It mirrors the structure of the human brain. Scientists and mystics have long noted how the eye, when broken down into its parts, visually maps onto the pineal gland, the thalamus, and the limbic system. This is the spiritual seat of perception, what many traditions call the third eye. The ancients didn't stumble upon this symbol by accident. They encoded inner truth into visual form. They gave us a map of consciousness. When your third eye is closed, you're blind to more than visions. You're blind to truth. You walk through life seeing only the surface, chasing desires that never satisfy, obeying systems that don't serve you, repeating patterns you can't explain. You think you're awake because your eyes are open, but you're moving through a dream someone else scripted. That's what the Eye of Horus represents. Awakening from the lie. The world you live in wasn't designed to nurture this kind of vision. It feeds the physical eyes with distractions, media, status, noise, while starving the inner eye. From childhood, you're trained to trust only what can be measured, repeated, explained. But the Eye of Horus doesn't operate in logic. It operates in knowing, intuition, symbol, pattern, and when it begins to open in you, the world stops looking random. It starts to reveal itself. You begin to notice synchronicities that are too precise to be coincidence. You see how stories, archetypes, and emotions repeat in cycles. You start to sense when something is off, even if you can't explain it. That's the return of the eye. It's not magic. It's perception freed from the prison of physical-only awareness. And it changes everything. In the myth, Horus's restored eye becomes more powerful than before. Not just because it sees more, but because it sees truly. And isn't that what we're all searching for? Not more information, but clarity. The ability to cut through illusion and see the pattern beneath the noise, the truth hidden beneath appearances. This is why the Eye of Horus became a symbol of protection, healing, and power. Because when your vision returns, so does your sovereignty. You stop reacting blindly. You start moving intentionally. You become less like a victim of fate, and more like the observer of a grand unfolding. You're not disconnected from the divine. You're staring it in the face, through every moment. But there's a reason this truth isn't taught in schools or shown in mainstream culture. Because people with awakened vision don't follow blindly. They question. They see systems for what they are. They trust themselves. And that's dangerous to any structure built on control. The Eye of Horus isn't watching you. It's in you. And every time you stop and listen to your inner knowing, every time you trust your intuition over the noise, you honor it. You remember, you see, not with the eyes of the world, but with the vision of the soul. At some point, you have to stop asking what the myth means and start asking what it reveals about you. Because the story of Horus wasn't written to entertain. It was encoded to awaken. It doesn't exist to give you historical facts or religious doctrine. It exists to hold a mirror to your soul, to reflect back everything you've forgotten about who you are and what you're capable of becoming. When you stop seeing Horus as a figure outside of you and start recognizing him as a force within you, everything changes. Horus is the part of you that remembers, the part of you that refuses to die, even when everything else is collapsing. When you hit your lowest point, when you're broken, grieving, questioning the point of it all, and something deep inside whispers, "This isn't the end," that's Horus. When you're surrounded by noise, confusion, chaos, and yet you still feel a thread pulling you toward the light, that's Horus. He's not just a god on a wall in a temple. He's the voice that survives the storm. And this isn't just poetic metaphor. It's a living reality. Myth doesn't give you answers. It doesn't tell you what to do. It gives you structure, a way to understand the inner journey through symbolic events. The betrayal of Osiris is the betrayal you felt when life didn't go how you expected. The dismemberment is every time you felt scattered, lost, pulled apart by pain. Isis's search is the part of you that searches for meaning, even when it hurts. The birth of Horus is your first moment of awakening, when you realize that maybe there's more to this life than survival. And the battle with Set. That's the long fight of staying conscious in a world that rewards numbness. The reason myths like this survive thousands of years is because they're not tied to culture or era, they're tied to the human experience. They're not external stories, they're internal maps. You live them in cycles, over and over again. Every descent, every return, every rebirth. Horus isn't a distant god. He's your higher self in disguise. The version of you that exists beyond fear, beyond control, beyond programming. And that's what makes this dangerous. Because once you recognize yourself in the myth, you stop being controllable. You stop defining yourself by labels, status, or what the world tells you to want. You realize you're not here to play small. You're here to remember something sacred, something powerful, something ancient. You're not just a body. You're a soul that agreed to forget so it could remember. That's the real initiation, not into a religion, but into your true self. The world around you is built to keep you forgetting. Constant stimulation, constant noise, endless distractions that pull you away from the still, quiet place within where your Horus nature lives. But it's always there, waiting. You don't have to earn it, you just have to uncover it. Every myth, when properly understood, is a code, a language of the soul. That's why you can feel something stir in you when you hear these stories, even if you can't explain it. Your soul recognizes truth before your mind does. That's the power of archetype. It bypasses logic and speaks directly to your essence. And Horus is one of the most powerful archetypes we have. Not because he's perfect, but because he remembers who he is. And so must you. Without Isis, there is no Horus. Without the divine feminine, there is no resurrection. You can't speak of awakening, ascension, or spiritual power without honoring the one who gathered the broken, who remembered what others had forgotten, and who created life not through domination, but through sacred intention. Isis is not just the mother of Horus. She is the embodiment of wisdom, intuition, and spiritual sovereignty. And yet, like so many aspects of divine feminine power, she has been dismissed, buried beneath layers of myth and misunderstanding. But make no mistake, she is central to the entire journey. In the myth, it is Isis who searches for Osiris after he is torn apart. She doesn't wait for someone to save him. She doesn't curse the world or fall into despair. She takes action. She weaves together what was broken. She uses her magic, her memory, her voice, her devotion, and from that devotion, she restores life. She doesn't resurrect Osiris as he was, but transforms him into something new. And from that union, Horus is conceived, not through violence or conquest, but through divine will and sacred energy. That alone should tell you everything about the power of the feminine in ancient Egyptian spirituality. It wasn't passive, it was formative. Isis is the keeper of memory, the one who holds the blueprint of what's been lost. In spiritual terms, she represents the part of you that never forgets the truth, no matter how much the world tries to overwrite it. Even when your soul feels dismembered, scattered across disappointments, traumas, failures, there's a force within you that is still gathering the pieces, still holding the vision of wholeness, still believing in resurrection. That's Isis. In every human being, regardless of gender, Isis exists as that sacred inner knowing, that voice that says, "You are not your pain." That part of you that creates healing through presence, through love, through remembering who you were before the world tried to change you. And while Horus may be the symbol of the awakened self, It is Isis who midwives that awakening into reality. She births the light not from hope, but from knowledge, from remembrance. It's no coincidence that her name, Isis, is linguistically connected to words like throne and seat, because she is the throne upon which divine order is restored. She is the inner seat of power, and in your own journey, that throne must be reclaimed. Because awakening isn't just about spiritual insight, it's about restoring the balance between the masculine and the feminine within you, between action and intuition, structure and flow, will and wisdom. The suppression of the feminine wasn't just a cultural shift, it was a spiritual weapon. Because when the divine feminine is forgotten, so is the path to true power. You end up with systems built on control, domination, exploitation, and what's lost? Healing, connection, vision. Without Isis, you get ego without soul, structure without spirit. But the feminine never disappears. It waits, it whispers, it remembers, and when you're ready, it shows you the way back. Isis is the part of you that already knows what you came here to do, but is waiting for you to be still enough to hear it. She doesn't scream over the noise. She waits beneath it. And when you finally start listening, you'll realize she's been guiding you the entire time. To embrace Isis is to reconnect with the sacred. It is to honor the unseen, the intuitive, the magical. It is to stop chasing and start aligning. The modern world tells you that power is loud, aggressive, visible, but Isis teaches you that true power is magnetic. It draws in, it heals, it births. It doesn't dominate, it transforms. And that's the lesson of the myth. To awaken Horus, you must remember Isis. To rise into clarity, you must pass through the sacred waters of remembrance. This is the path not of conquest, but of reclamation. The divine feminine doesn't beg to be seen. It simply is. And once you see her, you begin to see yourself, not as broken or lost, but as part of something ancient, whole, and utterly unshakable. The story of Horus is not just a myth, it's an initiation. Every stage of his journey mirrors the stages of spiritual awakening, the death and rebirth of the soul, the climb from unconsciousness into clarity. This path wasn't created to be admired from a distance, it was built to be walked, not by priests in temples or prophets in history books, but by you. In ancient Egypt, initiates didn't learn by memorizing facts. They learned through ritual, through symbol, through direct experience. The mysteries of Horus, Osiris, and Isis weren't bedtime stories. They were the scaffolding for inner transformation. To be initiated was to walk through symbolic death, to descend into the underworld of your own psyche, and to rise reborn, not with new beliefs, but with new sight. This is what Horus represents, not blind belief, but earned vision. He doesn't become the rightful heir of Osiris simply because he was born to it. He becomes it by enduring the trials, the chaos, the war. He earns the throne by facing what most would run from, and so do you. The path of light isn't easy. It never has been, because light doesn't just illuminate, it exposes. When you begin to awaken, everything you've been avoiding comes into focus. Your fears, your conditioning, your attachments, the parts of you that still serve set. Awakening is rarely comfortable. It's disorienting. You start to see the lies you've lived inside, about who you are, what success looks like, what love is, what matters. And when that illusion shatters, the real work begins. In the mystery schools, this process was known as the crucible, a space of pressure, friction, and alchemy. The self must be broken apart to be put back together. The ego must be humbled. The seeker must become empty enough to receive. This isn't about chasing enlightenment like it's a prize. It's about shedding what isn't true until only the essence remains. The modern world has hijacked the idea of awakening. It sells you the surface, crystals, slogans, aesthetic spirituality, without the deeper depth it requires. Real initiation costs everything that isn't real. It demands you let go of the identities that keep you comfortable but small. It asks for your willingness to enter the unknown without a guarantee. Just like Horus, you must face the darkness not to escape it, but to integrate it. There is no shortcut, no hack, no bypass. Awakening is a path you walk barefoot, with eyes wide open and illusions falling like ash behind you. It's raw, it's sacred, and it's yours. Horus walks this path not just to win, but to become. He moves through betrayal, injury, isolation, and eventually clarity. And in that process, he stops being a boy seeking justice and becomes a sovereign being rooted in truth. That's the transformation. Not from weak to strong, but from scattered to whole, from reactive to conscious, from identity to essence. And this is where most people turn back, because just before awakening there is always resistance. The mind clings to the known. The ego resists annihilation. But the truth? What's waiting on the other side is not destruction. It's return. Return to what you've always been beneath the programming, the trauma, the fear. You're not becoming something new. You're remembering something ancient, something buried under years of forgetting. And every time you choose presence over impulse, every time you breathe instead of react, every time you listen to that still voice within rather than the noise outside, you step further onto the path of Horus. Initiation isn't a ceremony you attend. It's a fire you survive. It's the moment you realize you can't go back to sleep because now you've tasted the truth, and it won't let you rest. And that is a gift, because once you see, you can't unsee. And once you remember who you are, the throne you were chasing outside of yourself is revealed to have always been within you. The story of Horus is a myth, but myth doesn't mean untrue, it means encoded. The ancients didn't speak in literal terms, they spoke in layers, in symbols, in frequencies. Myth was their language of initiation, a way to embed spiritual technology in stories that could pass through generations without losing their power. On the surface, Horus is a falcon-headed god who battles Set. But underneath, this is something else entirely. It's a blueprint, a multi-dimensional map of consciousness, death, rebirth, and divine order. The story wasn't just about Egypt. It was about the soul. Ancient myths weren't created at random. They were built like architecture, with geometry, intention, and resonance. They contained harmonics, truths that would echo through time. The characters were never just characters. Osiris is consciousness before fragmentation. Set is entropy, ego, chaos. Isis is memory, magic, and integration. Horus is the child of it all, the light that returns after darkness. And if you look closely, you'll see that this structure doesn't just exist in Egyptian lore, it repeats. In Greek mythology, you see Dionysus, born of a divine father, dismembered and reconstituted. In Christian tradition, Jesus dies and is reborn, the son of a holy mother and a father from above, locked in conflict with worldly powers. In Hindu stories, Krishna and Rama embody divine truth battling illusion. These aren't coincidences. These are patterns, archetypes, echoing across culture, time, and language. Why? Because the human soul evolves through story, and the deepest stories aren't written, they're remembered. This is what we mean when we say reality is holographic. Every part reflects the whole. The myth of Horus doesn't just explain the spiritual path, it is the spiritual path. Over and over again it plays out in your life. Destruction, fragmentation, memory, resurrection, war, illumination. The micro mirrors the macro. Your inner life mirrors the myth, and the myth mirrors the structure of the cosmos. This is why the ancients didn't separate science, philosophy, and spirituality. To them, it was all one system, a sacred order. Modern life stripped this away. It told you stories are make-believe, that gods are fantasies, that myths are primitive relics. But maybe they said that because they no longer understood how to read them. Or maybe they knew exactly what they were hiding. Because when you understand how to decode myth, you stop being a passive participant in life. You start becoming the architect, the observer, the initiate. The myth of Horus contains hermetic laws, even if they're not named. As above, so below, mirrored in the battle between the heavens and the earthly realm. The principle of polarity, Horus and Set, light and dark. The principle of rhythm, death and resurrection, day and night, loss and return. These aren't just metaphysical ideas. They're experiences you've lived through without realizing it. When Horus loses his eye and regains it, he doesn't just recover something, he evolves. The eye is returned by Thoth, symbol of divine wisdom and sacred geometry, meaning awareness comes not from brute force, but from higher knowledge. That's the code. You don't reclaim your inner sight by fighting harder, you reclaim it by perceiving deeper. Every part of this story has meaning. Even the way the Eye of Horus was broken into 6 parts, each representing a fraction and a sense. Sight, hearing, taste, touch, thought, and smell. The whole of perception. The myth tells you, wholeness isn't just spiritual, it's sensory, mental, embodied. You awaken not just by thinking differently, but by experiencing differently. This is why the ancients carved these stories in stone, because even when memory fades, symbols remain, and symbols speak directly to the subconscious, bypassing all the layers of logic and defense. The myth of Horus isn't trying to convince you of anything. It's inviting you to remember something you already know. And in a world that constantly tries to make you forget your power, your path, your purpose, remembering is a revolutionary act. Reading myth is reading yourself. And the more you understand how to see beyond the literal, the more you begin to notice the code running through everything. Nature, numbers, story, emotion, even suffering. You were never meant to just hear the myth. You were meant to embody it. The temples were schools. The gods were archetypes. The stories were rituals. And your life is not separate from any of it. You are a walking symbol, a living myth. And now that you've remembered, the only question left is what you will do with it. The return of Horus isn't something that happened once. It's something that keeps happening every time a soul chooses to wake up. Not everyone does. Some stay lost in the noise, trapped in the illusion, hypnotized by the surface of life. But some remember. They feel the stirring within, the sense that something sacred is buried beneath the chaos. And when that memory rises, so does Horus. To reclaim the inner eye is to choose vision over blindness. Not physical vision, but the kind that sees with the soul. The eye that pierces through distraction, ego, and deception to perceive the underlying truth. The third eye, the Eye of Horus, the seat of divine perception. It's not a fantasy or some new age cliché. It's a faculty you've always had but were trained to forget. It's what allows you to sense alignment, to feel when something is off, to know when something is true before the mind has caught up. And in a world that thrives on confusion, that kind of sight is revolutionary. This return begins quietly. You start to withdraw from the false identities you've worn, the ones shaped by other people's expectations, by systems that never had your best interest in mind. You stop chasing validation and begin seeking alignment. You begin to notice how much of your life has been built around keeping the ego comfortable rather than the soul awake. And little by little, that inner eye starts to open, first as a whisper, then as a pattern, then as a presence that won't let you go back to who you were. You start feeling your way through life, not just thinking your way through it. You trust your gut, even when it contradicts logic. You sense truth in symbols, in synchronicities, in moments that seem random but hit you like messages. You see through systems and stories that used to hold you captive. You don't just wake up, you stay awake. And in that state, the world looks different. Not softer, not easier, but real. This is Horus returning to the throne, not as mythology, but as consciousness. And that throne isn't out there, it's within you. It's the state of being where your awareness governs your actions, where clarity rules over chaos, where sovereignty replaces survival. But make no mistake, this isn't a final destination. Horus doesn't return once and stay forever. He must be chosen over and over, because Set never disappears entirely. The ego will still whisper. The chaos will still knock. The system will still try to pull you back into numbness. The throne is never given. It must be claimed daily, through stillness, through presence, through truth. And in that process, you begin to change your life from the inside out. You no longer live reactively. You live intentionally. Not because you're chasing perfection, but because you're committed to remembering your essence, your purpose, your inner order. And that's what it means to be awake, not to be perfect, but to be present, fully, consciously, courageously present in a world designed to keep you distracted. This is the return of Horus, not as a god on a wall, but as awareness within, as the light that cannot be bought, tamed, or silenced. And when that light comes back into your life, it doesn't scream, it doesn't beg for attention, it simply sits on the throne, quiet, clear, and unshakable. You begin to speak differently, move differently, love differently, not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you've remembered who you are. You've returned to the seat of power you never truly lost, only forgot. Horus doesn't live in temples. He lives in you. And every time you choose presence over programming, purpose over performance, sovereignty over submission, he returns. You were never just hearing a story. You were being handed a map, a coded transmission, passed through time, not to entertain you, but to awaken you. The myth of Horus was never about gods in the sky or ancient rituals locked in temples. It was always about the soul, about your journey, about what happens when you forget who you are and what it takes to remember. And now, here you are, standing at the edge of that remembering. This isn't mythology, this is initiation. Every step Horus took, you've taken in your own way. You've known what it means to lose. You've been torn apart, betrayed, disoriented. You've wandered in your own deserts of confusion. And yet, something in you never stopped looking. Something in you still believes there's more. That's not naivety. That's the ancient fire that's been burning in seekers since the beginning of time. The ones who look beyond the surface. The ones who won't settle for a life that feels scripted and numb. The ones who hear truth in silence, in symbols, in stories like this one. You are not here by accident. These words didn't find you by chance. Deep down, you already know that. Because something in this story didn't just inform you, it stirred you, it reminded you. It echoed through your bones, through your intuition, through that feeling you get when something resonates so deeply it bypasses logic. That's not emotion, that's recognition. You recognized yourself in Horus because the myth is living in you. The descent into fragmentation, the search for meaning, the spiritual rebirth, the battle with the ego, the return of the inner eye. It's all part of your unfolding. The story didn't happen once. It's happening now. And you're not just a character in it. You're the one holding the pen. The modern world would have you believe that power lives outside you, in systems, titles, appearances, institutions. But ancient truths like this one remind you that the most powerful journey is inward, that the highest throne is not in a palace, it's in your mind. And when you sit on that throne with awareness, integrity, and vision, the external begins to bend around the internal. That's the secret no one told you. The story of Horus isn't about fate, it's about alignment. There's no need to chase the light anymore. You are the light. The challenge is to stop dimming it to fit into a world built for amnesia. The more you remember, the less you comply, the less you shrink, the less you tolerate systems that feed your ego but starve your soul. And if you've made it this far, it's because something inside you refuses to go back to sleep. That part of you is sacred. Feed it, honor it, keep going deeper. And if you're ready to dive into teachings we can't always share publicly, sign up for Insights Academy, our free newsletter. You'll also receive the Kybalion ebook, an ancient hermetic key, for a limited time only. You were never lost. You were walking the map in your own way. You don't need to become Horus. You already are. And now, you've remembered the path. The only question left is whether you'll walk it fully, whether you'll hold that vision when the world tries to pull you back into illusion, whether you'll keep your eye open, The throne is yours, but it will only hold your weight if you bring your truth with you. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."